Day 14. We've reached Montana. Conditions? Favorable. Morale has been better, but we're still hopeful. And the journey continues. Hello friend, welcome back. I'm very excited because I decided to try something new. So if you follow my channel, you know that I usually do monthly music videos of an original song, and they're usually homemade videos, which I have a lot of fun making, and it's always a really interesting backstory, both of that song and why and how I wrote it, and of the making and filming and editing of the video. These have been some of my most complex creative projects in the last half year or so, and I find myself telling my friends the stories behind all of these things, and I really wanted to be able to tell all of you too. So today we're going to start by talking about the 3-week cross-country road trip that I just took, because it was a really big creative journey for me, and it was a really interesting trip. A lot of crazy stuff happened, and I want to tell you a little bit about it and hopefully relay to you some of the creative lessons that I learned along the way. So for me, this trip was really the ultimate practice of just surrendering control and kind of doing the trust fall kind of thing back into the universe's arms, and just saying completely, like, I'm just gonna be taken care of. It was that complete faith kind of feeling. So first things first, we'll start with the original plan of the trip. Now the original plan I had in the winter, right before the pandemic, of course. And the plan had been actually to, at the end of May, go drive out to the Tetons, run a half marathon, my second half marathon, and use that as an excuse to do a road trip, a cross-country road trip. And then there was a second part of the trip that I've been in contact with a producer out in LA, who's a really, really awesome person, very talented. And we had been going back and forth for the last half year or so, and I essentially was supposed to go out there and meet him as well. And then the pandemic hit, and all of those plans, of course, exploded. Bye-bye plans. All races as we knew it were canceled for the foreseeable future, and California, of course, was on lockdown forever. But then I got an email in the middle of May from the race company that I did my first race with, saying that they were holding a socially distant, safe, overnight, like at nighttime race right outside of Zion National Park in Utah. The race was going to be held in little, like very small sections, hour to hour. And when I read this email, I heard a voice inside of me say, "You're going to do that race." And I just knew, like there was no question. I knew that that's what I needed to do. And I had exactly a week to figure everything out before I needed to leave in order to get to this race on time. So at first I just wasn't thinking. I was like, okay, I'm gonna go, I'm going to sleep in my car or tent camp. I'm going to be like as isolated as possible. I wasn't really worried about it. I can rough it really well when I need to. The original plan had been go alone, but I just so happened to hit up one of my dearest friends, Stella, and asked her if she wanted to go along. And the good thing about Stella is that she's pretty much down for anything all the time, which is basically why she's one of my best friends. She actually was my friend who came with me to Thailand all of those years ago, which inspired my song, Paradise, which is a whole crazy backstory in itself. So if you go to my website and download Paradise, it comes with the behind the scenes story of that song. Anyway, I digress. So she says, yeah, why not? F it, I'll go with you. Now, you have to understand, I am the friend in my friend groups that plans the agenda for all travel trips. I pride myself at being a very good travel planner. So here I go, I start planning, and The plan is to, yes, be the most socially distant as possible, but also to be the safest as possible. You really have to take that into account, of course, when you are two women trying to sleep in a car. And going through the Midwest is just kind of funky. Once you get out west, it's usually very safe. But I began planning the places that we would stop overnight and hitting up people who I knew in those places so that we would have a place to park our car in somebody's driveway or tent in their yard, stuff like that. And so the plan after a few days was really coming together. We were going to leave from Richmond, Virginia, and then head to Chattanooga, Tennessee that evening, spend the night at my cousin's complex, and then head over to Oklahoma City, where we would stay with a friend of a friend who we'd never met before, and then get to Santa Fe, New Mexico, and stay with someone else there before getting to and arriving at Zion in Utah. But here was the funny part. So we begin the trip, it's great, we're in the car, we leave from Richmond.
Gotta go west, gotta go west.
And it only takes a few days for my perfectly crafted plans to completely just fall apart in the best of ways. And we just began fully embracing acting on our tuition and our impulses. And we just got into this very natural rhythm of truly going with the flow of whatever happened. And a couple of really magical things that happened because of this mindset. So we had no intention of going to the Grand Canyon, right? But we had spent the night in Oklahoma, went to New Mexico, ended up sleeping in the forest, in the Santa Fe forest, instead of with someone in their driveway. And then that night we were sleeping in the car, and I had looked up the Grand Canyon, and it was only like a 6-7 hour drive. And I told Stella, I was like, Stella, have you seen the Grand Canyon? She was like, no. Do you want to go? And I said, we have a couple extra days before the race. Okay. So we drove to the Grand Canyon just randomly. And because she had to see it, you know, if you've been there, you know, it's just one of the most insane things you'll ever see as a person right now on this earth. And so we drive there, right? We're driving all day long. And once I had looked up dispersed camping, which is, you know, usually on government land that is free. You can just set up camp, which is what we were trying to do, saving money, and found this one piece of land that was right outside the Grand Canyon. So we're going down this crazy dirt gravel road for like an hour, and it's one of those that goes where we have my Honda Fit. That's what we drove the whole time, and I was sure that my wheels were going to just like fall off, and we had no service. It was very nerve-wracking, but we sang songs the whole time and just like had a great time. Finally, we get to that space that you can disperse camp, and the sun is basically about to set, right? But I just have this feeling, and I'm like, Stella, just keep driving down this road for a minute. I'm looking at my GPS, and I'm like, So we keep driving down the road, which is smoothed out a little bit, and all of a sudden the path opens up and we enter the road, like we enter the Grand Canyon Park. We're just in there all of a sudden. It's like this secret entrance, literally. And so we start getting on the road, and I kind of know where we are because I went there 2 years ago. There's no one on this road when usually there's a million people. And we start driving down it, and there's just, in 10 minutes, there's this one lone parking spot on the side of the rim. I say, park there. So we park there really quickly. We go out to the rim, and there's the canyon. And the sun is setting right then, like it's for us. And we don't see anyone. We could have been the only people in the canyon, in the world, really. And gosh, it was just one of the most incredible moments. And we picked our rocks that had like the steep, like you could just fall and die if you stepped off of it. And the thing about the canyon is that the colors at sunset, they change so rapidly and just so vastly, and the sun sets in the canyon before it sets in the sky, and it gets so dark down there. And we were just sitting there just in complete awe, lost ourselves for an hour and said nothing, just in complete silence. And it was basically one of the most magical times of my life. And I thought that it couldn't get any more magical, but things just kept happening. Just one other example is that we had planned on going to Utah, racing, and coming back kind of through the middle of America, through Colorado in that area. And we ended up going up the coast, the Pacific Coast Highway, and went through Vegas, LA, and San Francisco, and then Portland, which it's weird going through huge cities in pandemics. We didn't really stop. We just drove through, which was interesting, and then we came back up through the north. So we saw the redwoods. We ended up going to Yellowstone, ended up seeing Mount Rushmore, and all just on a whim. There was this one point, I think that it was in Oregon. I know it was somewhere in the Pacific Northwest that we stopped near the redwoods and parked, and we were just in, forest land. And Stella was like, I don't know if she had seen a lake or if she was just feeling like there was a body of water beyond these trees, like beyond this little forest patch. She was like, can we go over there and see if there's something? I think there's something there. And we had just developed this habit of just saying yes to each other no matter what. And it always got us into good trouble. So I said, yeah. So we go and we're walking through this forest for like 10 minutes. Sure enough, it opens up to these big reeds, and we start walking through the reeds, and all of a sudden we come out onto this freaking mountain lake that like you can't see from the roads. Like we couldn't see anything. It was just in the middle of nowhere. And we dipped our toes in the water, and it felt so good, and it was like crystal clear water and just like rocky bottom. And so we just, in the middle of the day, totally went skinny dipping in this lake. I can't lie to you, it was amazing. And again, just another like magical free moment. And then just dried off, put our clothes on, went on our merry way, kept driving. So I do want to talk too, it wasn't all roses and sunshine and butterflies. There were challenges on this trip, and one of the very first ones that came to light very early was obviously that we went basically right when the Black Lives Matter protests began. We literally left the morning after the very first protests in Richmond, Virginia happened, and that was a lot to cope with, as it was for everyone. And we definitely, a lot of our conversations centered around just all of the emotions we were feeling, as far as like, what should we be feeling right now? Like we're not there to help, and how can we help? And feeling guilty and feeling so sad, for all the suffering that everyone's going through, and just feeling weird, for not really knowing how to feel. And I personally encouraged Stella to not just be on the media, and I tried my hardest to not be on the media, because I felt like we couldn't do anything at that moment other than like it wouldn't be right to not be where we were and to take full advantage of filling up our souls and preparing ourselves for getting back into the real world later. But we had a lot of really good conversations with each other about how we were going to move forward in being more committed to anti-racism, in just being more aware, conscious, better people. Another completely different challenge was the fact that I am I am scared of the dark. I'm generally a pretty scared person, as in paranoid, as in like I'm convinced that something bad is going to happen to me. So sleeping in a car in the middle of nowhere was a huge challenge for me. I didn't sleep well because I was afraid rednecks were gonna come murder us on the mountain, 'cause we saw bullet holes in all the signs we passed. But we're still alive. That's all she wrote. I got way more used to it, but there were a couple times when I was very freaked out and couldn't really sleep that well, just because yeah, it is something that like I don't think that men have to worry about as much, of just thinking about like, yeah, but there's like, what if, you know, that never really happens, but what if, and then we don't have a way to get out of a situation. So that was an interesting thing to experience, observe myself. We were completely fine the whole time and had 2 pepper sprays, which we didn't have to use. So it was fine. Now, of course, there was anxiety about the pandemic, about COVID, especially when we hit the urban places and we were getting food every so often. We had most of our food in a bin in the back that we had shopped for before the trip, so that we didn't have to have that contact, but we would stop and get, you know, some treats here and there. And anytime we were in an urban setting, it was just really crazy because we were getting very wild, you know, we were used to being out in the wild with no one. And so that was very disconcerting always, which was interesting. But other than that, it really was a really fantastic trip, and I think it was a huge growing time for both of us, and we helped each other grow and get through 3 weeks of being on the road in a tiny car.
Breakfast with champs.
So here are some unexpected ways that the trip helped my will to create. Now, I didn't play music every single day like I had totally expected to, and usually it happened in ways that I completely didn't expect. Like, Stella brought her violin, which was very cool, so I still have videos that I'm posting of us just jamming in the middle of nowhere in a national park or something like that. That was really fun. But probably the biggest surprise, no, definitely the biggest surprise of this trip, creatively and overall, is the crazy moment of kismet that happened. So, in a nutshell, my musical mentor, who is an incredible musician, texted me as we were driving through the desert in New Mexico to Utah, saying, hey, weren't you supposed to go on that road trip out to LA? Not knowing that that had kind of fallen through when the pandemic happened. California was on lockdown, and I was like it was out of my trajectory to meet with the producer at this time. Now, my mentor also didn't know that I had gone out west anyway. So he had texted me just to say what's up, and I completely took that as a sign, and I called him and I said, hey, do you think that I should call the producer and ask if he's busy or if he's still on lockdown, or, you know, just tell him that I'm in the general area of the West? And he said, yeah, I mean, it couldn't hurt, why not? So I call him and ask, you know, what he's up to, and tell him where I'm at, my situation. And he says, well, our lockdown just ended yesterday. How crazy is that? So we make plans to meet at the studio after the race. So I hung up the phone. That night we get to our campsite in Arizona, and I think to myself, and this is probably the craziest creative part of the whole trip, I say, you know, he's heard my music, he's heard my songs, but I want to write something completely fresh, completely new to be able to show to him. So I begin writing that night, and then in the morning, I wake up really early and start writing this song with the theremin and the loop station and my voice. And it is definitely inspired by this trip in that it's called altitude sickness, which we're in Arizona in the high desert by that time. So it was definitely warranted. But I was pretty happy with it. And so I recorded it very quickly, kind of sloppily, on my theremin and my loop station onto my GarageBand on my computer outside right next to our tent. It was surrounded by RVs and stuff. And that's the single that I brought when we got to Los Angeles. So we go to Utah, have this incredible time, race this incredible run, and then head out to Los Angeles. And I got to work in a studio with an incredible man, or I should say an incredible couple of men, because the sound engineer was, of course, working there with us after all. And it was one of the highlights of my entire life. So the clarity that I gained in this trip and afterward, it was this 3-week daily practice of acknowledging my lack of control over things, which is huge for me because I'm such a control freak, and just having faith in the universe. And honestly, I've never really done that before for that period of time. And I feel like the past couple months, really, maybe even the past year, has been so huge for me in developing and cultivating this practice of faith as such a huge part of my life. And I'm not talking about faith religiously by any means, which is very difficult because I think in our culture we associate faith with dogmatic religion. And I simply don't think that one belongs to the other. I think that now that I have started to incorporate faith into my life, and like I say, I define faith as trust falling back into the universe, admitting that you are not all-knowing and you do not have control, and that you know that you do not have control and that you do not know. That is the first step to freedom. It's totally true, and I know that it's totally true because it keeps being proven to me every single time that I give up my own ego, I surrender, and I go with the flow of this energy that I feel all around me. Good things happen, and not just good things, but things that feel right and true and aligned. And so I've been developing this practice and these habits and this belief system, this spiritual life throughout my creative process, which really, to me, my creative life and my life are now so linked that I can't really tell them apart anymore. So when I'm starting to write songs now, it's so much less like it used to be, which is, me thinking a lot about like, how is this going to come across to people? What will people think? What will people think? What will they think? What will he think? What are these voices telling me in my head that I'm doing right or wrong? I don't do that anymore. I've really moved more toward getting in this zone where I can actually cut that off more and more and more, and simply just be receptive to what needs to be made through me, what's asking to be made through me. I think that's a Liz Gilbert quote for you. Big magic, AA. But it's true, and that's really what my experience was throughout this whole trip, and it just solidified everything for me. And so I hope that hearing that maybe inspires you to delve into the idea of faith, which I think we could all use a little bit more of right now. And yeah, motivates you to go move your body around, maybe discover something new, even if it's in your own backyard, and be in wonder a little bit be humbled a little bit by this world and let that affect your creative life. Now, if you liked this behind the scenes look into my epic creative road trip cross country, please like this video, subscribe to my channel, and hit the notification button so you know when my new videos are out each week. And give me a comment and tell me what you liked the most about this and what other maybe songs or videos of mine you would like to hear the behind the scenes story on. All right, my love, that's all I got for today. Bye.
'Tis 7 long years since the last time